I'm Michael Cader. I created publisherslunch.com and publishersmarketplace.com, which are electronic newsletters and websites for people in the book publishing business.
Welcome to the Bibliophile.
My pleasure to be here.
You spoke this morning to a crowd at Book Expo Canada. One of the things that I thought was most interesting about what you said was that we need to use all of these wonderful new opportunities, thanks to the Internet, to protect those things that we cherish the most. I wonder if you could elucidate.
Well, it's a process of trying to re-educate people in a new context about the value of what authors and publishers do, because the distinctions between formally published, edited, acquired, and produced material and informally amateur, self-produced, acquired material disappears on the Internet. And just putting a company logo on top isn't sufficient to explain why something on one site is different than another. And yet, I do still believe that for the most part, things that come about through a publishing house are in fact very different than the kind of content that you find elsewhere. It used to be a given that people knew that, and publishers forget that it's not a given anymore. And what I was also talking about is there's a tremendous amount of passion and expertise and knowledge that gets layered onto the process of taking a book from the author's hands to putting it into the marketplace. And conventionally, that was supposed to disappear. It was supposed to be hidden because you just wanted attention on the author's finished work. But in today's world, people want to know context. They want to know background. They want to understand all of the passion and selection and editing and decision-making that went into that final product, and that's valuable information. Now, it makes them more interested and more bonded to the product, and at the same time, it reaffirms that there's something different about the process that led to the creation of this book than to somebody typing up a post and going back to bed.
And plopping it up on the Internet and selling it, but on
which I do all the time, so I have great respect for that as well.
So basically, what you're saying is that book publishers should be doing the same sort of thing that the movie business is doing with their DVDs. All of the extra stuff that you get when you rent a DVD, over and above the feature presentation, you get the voiceover from the director, you get all sorts of interesting little snippets and background on. It's almost deconstructing the actual process, isn't it, for the audience? It seems to be that this audience now, these modern readers and viewers seem to be much more interested in the process than ever before.
I think so, and the other word for it is making it transparent. You're pulling away the curtain from the process surrounding the product itself. But also what I was talking about is putting oneself in the mindset of the reader and not just offering up extras, but trying to think of what extras are of interest to the reader. One of the simple things I keep lobbying for, and it should just happen in print, is for the authors themselves to tell the reader something beyond the work itself.
But wait a minute. If I'm an author, if I'm T.S. Eliot or Ezra Pound, I don't give a shit about why people are reading my stuff or catering to them. I'm committed to the creative process.
Which is your option. No author has to say any more than they wish to say. In Eliot and Pound's case, they're dead, so we won't be hearing from them. But we've heard from lots of other people about them. In most cases, if you're a new author or if you're a relatively new author, we don't know as much about you as we know about Eliot or Pound. And whether we like it or not, the role that any creative person assumes in a contemporary world has changed. If you want an audience, and you want a large audience, and you want to make money from that audience, you have to do certain things to serve that audience.
That's the nub of it,
if you don't care about those parts, you may create your work and let your work stand for itself, and in rare instances, that work will find an audience, whether you're dead or alive. And we know of many great artists whose work did not find an audience until after they were dead. Or you can stick around and try to find that audience while you're alive. My experience has been with most people, every author has ideas of what they will and won't do. But I've met very few authors who didn't find satisfaction in being engaged with their readership, because ultimately most creators create because they have to, but the next reason is because they want to engage with the people who are participating in their creative act. And we are in an era where that becomes a lot easier. And even if your book isn't going to sell very well, if you can engage with the people who appreciated it and did read it and did recommend it, that can be the salvation of the experience.
And also, it could add to more of the same. It could stimulate them to produce better, greater books.
It certainly can improve your work to be better connected to your readership and your audience. If nothing else, it gets you out of your own head. It used to be rare to know what a reader thought about your work, how they were engaged with it. And now the avenues exist for them to offer that to you, and you can choose to accept it and engage in it or not. Most writers I know love that. The reason 40 million people blog is both because of the platform, but because it's easy to talk back. And they're amazed at who they hear from and where those people came from, and they have no idea how they found them. And it's the satisfaction of that interaction that keeps all these people working way too hard for no money to express themselves. And I don't think that process is all that different from traditional artists and writers. They just haven't had that open means to connect with readership in the past.
And you're suggesting that publishers need to cultivate, to take advantage of the medium that now exists for establishing, promoting a closer bond between the reader and the writer as a way of succeeding in this environment.
Yes, a publisher's core job is to bring an author's work to the public. It used to be that you did that mostly by knowing a set of book buyers and wholesalers and a few influential reviewers and other cultural arbiters. And that was a small set of people where publishers had great relationships. Now to make something public means to go on the internet. It means to overwhelm people with information that explains and provides a window and takes them behind the scenes of and gives them the means to know about a work and to share what they know about that work and to tell other people about that work. Publishers need to be the enablers of public discussion of an author's work. And the more that publishers get to know individual readers through that process and can physically deliver a subset of readers to a particular author for a particular type of book, the better they are publishing that book, because ultimately that really is the publisher's job, is to broker the relationship between author and reader. It used to be to broker that, the publisher mostly had to go to the book buyer. But the book buyer isn't the main gatekeeper now. He is for Indigo, but out on the internet and elsewhere, he's not.
One of my favorite authors, J.M. Coetzee, does not do or does not enjoy, or he's a notoriously difficult interview, and I love him for that.
Right. The irascible aspect has worked for writers for ages, and if you're a good enough writer and you win enough awards and have good enough publishers, it still works. There's no question that one doesn't have to do this to survive and thrive as an author. There's also no question that the number of people who can be like Coetzee or like Pynchon or like DeLillo, well, that's the list. Maybe we left out two. But it's a very small list, and it's always the author's choice not to participate. John Updike got a lot of attention for his speech recently, and it was interpreted by many as being about Google and the tyranny of the internet age. My reading, if you look at it closely, is it's about economics. It's about the royalties that he wants to receive from having increasingly large audiences for his books versus what he's willing to do to engage in his audience and to make money by doing things other than just writing the books. And there is an economic side that authors will have to look at, but that's...
But I'm going to say that he wants to get more royalties from the publishers. He wants to take advantage of
He
what?
abhors the idea that the modern author needs to do more than just write the book, that he needs that he can and might derive money from speaking appearances, author events, engaging with readers in different ways, and having the book be part of his career and not the career in and of itself.
So in other words, being like a movie star. We've talked about the role of the publisher. Amazon is offering this fabulous new service. If you write a book, as you know, you may know, you go to Amazon, you pay $30. They'll stick your book up with your cover up against all the other books up there. You don't have to print it. You don't have to pay for anything.
Right.
You start selling that, Amazon can print on demand. You just get a check. Why do you need a publisher then?
You need a publisher because Amazon's just sticking it in their database. That's all they're doing for it. They're not editing it. They're not designing the cover.
Yeah.
They're not taking it to the media. They're not taking it to traditional retailers or wholesalers. They're not selling rights to it. They're not adding any expertise from editorial or sales or marketing. Some people can still make it work that way just fine on their own. It is a different set of services, and it is a different type of publishing. anytime sentences begin with the death of, a gray curtain kind of comes down in my brain, unless it's the death of the ice industry. And I think we can all agree that times did change, and people who used to sell blocks of ice are no longer in business. The publishing business is changing. Publishers are facing challenges, but so far the Internet's been a boon to publishers. Publishers sell a lot of books online. Publishers and find a lot of readers online. There are a lot of opportunities there. If you work in publishing as a business, it feels harder every day. It used to be that we only had to worry about our own little conglomerates, the big German companies, and that was as bad as it got. There are now obviously much larger, better capitalized companies, the internet companies, the technology companies, the software companies, that think they should be having something to do with publishing, and there are startups as well. But the business itself, selling books to people and collecting money for it, continues quite vibrantly. That could change. There's certainly increasing competition, but when you put publishing next to other so-called mature entertainment or culture industries, sales are not plummeting as they are in the music business. Box office is plummeting for movies. DVDs are saving them. These are common experiences among comparable businesses, all of whom are facing challenges, and none of whom are going away entirely. It's perhaps less fun to work in all of them, but there's a big gulf between that and the death of a business.
You mentioned in your talk this morning your website, which is publishersmarketplace.com, and the lunch,
publisherslunch.com is not really a separate site, but a window on our email newsletter, which is called Publishers Lunch.
And there's about 35,000 members that pay a fee to participate in this. One of the things that I liked about the way you talked about it, obviously, it's a success story, and more so now than ever, is that you're serving as a sort of a meeting place, a community of all sorts of people that are related to publishing, whereby they can put their own information up, they can exchange ideas, they can learn about the latest deals that have been closed, they can exchange email addresses, and they then have access to all sorts of useful information about deals, for example, that may not have previously been available. Is this the model that publishers should follow? This is what they should do to thrive?
I think certainly comparable models can and should be followed by publishers. In my case, my expertise and passion was publishing itself, so that naturally limited me to an audience of other people in publishing. In 6 years, I've come to more or less own that market. I've become the largest force in information for people in the book publishing business, and I did that, essentially myself and with my webmaster. We were not reliant on capital or big staff or legacy brands, and we overtook legacy brands and big staff and big companies who watched this happen but didn't know what to do about it.
But the information basically is coming from the people that participate. It's like that's the most valuable information, is the stuff that you're getting from the participants in your community.
We're getting information from the participants, and we're finding information elsewhere and making it useful to those participants. Everyone has an information problem right now, and whether you're in publishing or whether you like cookbooks or you're in sports, we're all experiencing it. There's too much information. Electronic filters still aren't good enough. You can come up with all kinds of sites and filters that are supposed to present you with the right things. But a human editor and a human filter with a very particular focus and deep knowledge of a subject area is always going to be better.
But, and this isn't that exactly that's what a publisher is.
That's what a publisher does.
In essence, it's a bit like why you go to The Economist, because it's so well written and they cover the topics in a way that few others do. Same with The New Yorker. They save you time, and when you go there, you're not going to waste your time. You're going to get a really useful, informative experience.
Exactly. And in some respects, you could say that the flood of information on the Internet actually only presents greater opportunities to do just that, whether it's in cooking or boating or sports or even literary fiction. Any area in which there are people with passionate interests who don't have the time, the ability, or the judgment to look at everything all the time and prioritize it and figure it out and give it context. There's room, and theoretically that is what publishers do already. If you're a cookbook editor, you see hundreds of proposals and you select a few. You select them for a reason. You're shaping a list. You're understanding the marketplace. You're looking at trends. You're understanding the direction of cooking. You're understanding what people like to cook at home. All this knowledge right now just gets funneled into, okay, Nigel, I'm going to buy your book, but I'm not going to buy your wife's book. But that same knowledge, passion, and expertise can be made transparent. It can be harnessed towards telling consumers, I know everything about cooking. I'm on top of trends. I'm publishing these books for a reason. I can also recommend these other books where I was the underbidder, and I wish I'd had it. It's a great book. It's okay. You can go buy that, too.
And you're providing the original source information, too, which I like, is what you've talked about. Whereas you provide the links to all sorts of, you say, the press releases that might come in about that topic. Here, you don't like my take on it, go directly to the source.
Exactly. And people often raise the so-called authority question on the Internet. Oh, well, how do I know who you are or where that's coming from? You develop trust by establishing a relationship with your readers, and you develop it through transparency and tracking back to sources. So the way people know how to trust my information or to see how I've changed the information, because I do change it, I do put it in context, is by attaching sources so that people can, it's, when I was in school, they used to say, show your work. And somewhere along the line, you grow up
footnotes,
and you stop showing your work. And we're just coming back now to showing our work again, which is a good thing. It lets people know how you got to where you are. And it also lets them jump off and go follow those paths themselves. So again, I went through a lot of work. I had to find the source. I took the information, and then I wrote what I wrote. Why shouldn't I let you know where it came from? Why shouldn't I put that work to work for you?
As a service.
We're in a world where readers appreciate that.
But then especially because, the people that visit your site are actually paying you for it.
Right.
It's not that yours is a free site.
Right. There is a free version of my newsletter, but the site is paid. So.
Yeah, okay. Just in closing, could you then, some of my favorite publishers are Faber and Canongate and, Jonathan Cape, they're under bigger umbrella now, and et cetera, Bloomsbury. Let's say you're the CEO of these companies. What are you going to do? You obviously sort of have to do a baseline, have a look at what they got right now on their websites, and I imagine you may be familiar with some of their sites. What would you do to improve them?
Well, I don't have their websites in front of me, so it's a little hard to say exactly.
Or FSG or any. Just say for example, it's
the three missions for any publisher are: focus in your list to begin with. You can't. It's very hard to be a general publisher these days. You have to have a reason to be doing what you're doing. You have to have a certain and particular expertise and a certain and particular passion. And if you're just placing little bets all over the place and don't have anything particular to offer, either to the authors in bringing them an audience or to the audience in bringing them a deep knowledge and expertise in a particular area, you're likely to be more vulnerable than most. The houses you've listed have a reputation. They have that reputation in part because they have stuck to the same type of publishing more or less for long periods of time. So they do have a heritage. They do have a tradition. Some of them are straying from that heritage and straying from that tradition. And more often houses stumble when they get too far from what makes them successful. Once you get past that focusing of the list, the two objectives are to develop direct relationships with readers. A publisher needs to deliver readers. They need to know readers. They need to have connections with readers. They need to be able to channel different readers to different types of books.
And how do they do that?
They do that very slowly and carefully. You begin by offering people things. You give them things of value, information, free samples, whatever it takes.
Like what?
You let them...
Like free samples of what?
Free samples of books, free chapters.
Off their site. You come to my site, you can read the
off their site at author readings. You let them know that you want to engage in a relationship. You let them know that if they're interested in the author, you can hook them up. You can send their letter on. You can post their comments. You have information to give them. We all have relationships all the time. We know how to structure relationships. You can't just go, hi, Nigel, I've got some stuff for you to buy. You want to be my friend? We develop a relationship. I have to find out what you're interested in. If you're interested in something I'm interested in, I tell you what I know about that subject. I give you something that you might find of value. I make a recommendation that might not be purely of self-interest.
Yeah.
You come and say, Michael knows about that stuff. I'm going to ask him again. I'm going to see what he's up to.
I trust that he truly is interested in the topic, and that he's got something useful to tell me.
These are true relationships. You come to know Jamie Bing at Canongate has great taste. Jamie likes this book. I like that book. Jamie likes these 10 books. I like all those 10 books. Why should Jamie have to start over with every book? If he knows that I like 10 of the books he's published, boy, it gets a lot better for book 11 if he can come back to me and say, I know you love these last 10. I'm going to put my recommendation on the line just as much for this one, and here's why it's like those other 10 that you already enjoyed. relationships are hard work, and they require focus and they require generosity.
And to do that on the net, do you have some very specific advice on how to do that on your website?
Make it an inviting place for people to come. Give them reasons to sign up for things, whether it's RSS feeds of information about authors they like, places to post comments, places to engage in conversations with the readers or with the editors or with anyone involved in the process whom they might want to have a connection to. A place where they can sign up to have a chance to receive an advance galley or something special.
Or even
from
a
someone
signed
they
copy.
like.
Yeah.
A signed copy, even a signed picture. As one of the other speakers was saying today, lots of readers have lots of enthusiasm for particular authors and books, and websites can be great places to channel that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
The flip side is to make your website abundantly full of information. Tell me everything known to humankind about your author and where I can go find it. Have the author post an audio file so I can hear their voice and I can hear their description of their next book. See if they're willing to post a chapter from a work in progress. Tell me all about all the articles that have been written about them. Point me to all the reviews about them. If they've got a separate website or a blog, show me where it is. Give me everything that's known about this particular person so I have the tools to develop that relationship if you're not going to take an active part in brokering that relationship for me. A lot of it can just have to do with abundance of information.
That's all well and good, but does that make me more money or not? I think that's the question that these publishers are asking. This is great, all this additional work that you're recommending that we do, but is this going to result in a higher profit margin?
Sure, it does.
And you're proof of that. Who is proof of that? What?
The proof ranges from Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, which can show you a direct correlation. The more information about a given book that they have to sell, the more copies they sell. And more information can just mean the jacket and the correct ISBN and an actual description or a couple reviews or some more information about the author, or in Amazon's case, it can mean search inside the book so that you can actually browse online. They all show a direct correlation. The more information they have about any given book, whether it's a book that sells 10 copies a year or a book that sells 10,000 copies a year, they sell more copies. On the micro level, you have lots of authors like Doug Clegg or M.J. Rosa. We could make a long list. Some of whom were rejected by traditional publishing, some of whom were embraced by traditional publishing but didn't do very well in it, who found that by being generous with readers and coming to know readers directly online, they grew their audiences, not just by tiny increments, but exponentially. They got to know people. There are lots of readers out there. Even a very successful book is probably capturing only the teeniest share of its potential market.
I hate to use the term the long tail, but I mean, once the first print run's done, then there's less of an incentive, I suppose, to go into second printing and third printing. But if you're putting all this stuff that's interesting information about all of these titles that are up there, then you're going to prolong the life of that book.
Well, and there's simple old-fashioned proof. My first and only job was working for Peter Workman at Workman Publishing. There's a sense in publishing that there are limited, tiny audiences for a particular book. Peter Workman has done brilliantly at selling hundreds of thousands of copies or millions of copies of books that most people would regard as inconsequential or not particularly world-shattering, and that are certainly books that in any other publisher's hands would sell a tenth as many copies. More publishers have been burned because an author went to Workman, sold 700,000 copies, so another publisher tried to lure them away, paid them too much money, and wound up selling 10,000 copies. They do a lot of things
So
there.
what is it?
One thing they do is they tour authors all the time. They tour them to too many cities, and they tour backlist authors, and they keep sending out publicity after the book's published. They make, in that old-fashioned way, they make information about their authors and books abundant all the time.
So they don't focus on this front list. It's like they come out with a book, and it's not just we give it an initial push. That is part of our product offering that doesn't go away. We keep promoting it.
Exactly. They never let go of a book.
Yeah.
And, there are books they publish What to Expect When You're Expecting, which when I was at the company when that was first published, and they got out 7,000 copies. Now, at most publishing companies, within 6 to 12 weeks, that book would have been dead. but they knew there was something special about it. They had a passion to communicate, and Peter and the staff wouldn't let go. And when it was selling 10,000 copies a month, he said, that's not enough. We need to sell more. And he had to go back to incredulous retailers and tell them, you don't understand how big this book can be. And they shook their heads, but they went along. And so now it sells 100,000 copies a month. And it's done that for month after month. The authors have revised the book 3 times. They really never stopped touring. They never stopped visiting OBGYNs. They never stopped talking to their audience. They kept going.
And yet the whole industry is focused on the latest bestseller, isn't it? I mean, sure, the bestseller list has books that have been on it for years, but it seems that the focus often is, the latest hot book,
Right.
this year's Booker, for example, as opposed to looking at books that have great quality, that you just continue to promote the great quality rather than the next best thing.
It's very hard work, and it's hard to have a company that does both at the same time. And the problem is, when you can't make your backlist generate better and better all the time, you need something to save you. You need a big hit to swallow all of your other misses. And so the energy gets channeled towards what's the next hit that's going to get us through the next quarter and make everything okay, rather than how do we make it so we don't need that next hit? How do we secure our base by continuing to believe in those things that we already believed in? And people have, in the business, have become conditioned to let go of things that they once believed in. The marketplace has spoken. Too bad. Can't do anything about it. Don't want to move on. Have to move on. But that's not the way that the business has to work. That's going to happen sometimes because there's too much product. But there are lots of examples, regular world like Workman and online world, that show us that if you don't let go, and if you have something to say, if you have lots of things to say, if you have a book that you believe in, that you can keep after it, and people will come to find it.
And again, we're talking about a classic work. If you fundamentally, passionately believe that this is a great work of fiction or nonfiction, if it truly is, I suppose, word of mouth will continue going, and that particular title will make that publisher a profitable enterprise long term.
Well, and there are classic works of all types, as we were just saying. Workman's biggest classic is a pregnancy book. It's
and people still get
it's
pregnant.
Not great literature, but people get pregnant all the time, and it's served,
and they die too.
Served a great need.
Have they got a death book
time
as well? They got one on death, how to die, or?
I think they have a book of obituaries, and people always like obituaries. But it also speaks to setting up a business model in which you're only publishing things that you really believe in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you either have to really believe in everything or really admit that you're just placing bets on the table and you don't care and you're going to walk away very quickly. And if you're doing that, eventually your authors and your agent base is going to get to know that. There's a better place in the future, I think, for people who are sticking to what they believe in, that are publishing with a program, with a plan, with passion, with energy, with continued devotion, and I think the benefits will come back to the authors.
You mentioned 3 things. I don't know. Did we cover all 3 of the suggestions for publishers? Do you remember? Or?
I don't know. We probably have to play back the tape to know for sure.
Okay.
Let's bet that there are 3 there, because if there aren't, I'm not sure which one we didn't cover yet.
Okay. Are you happy where you're at now? You've got a successful website that's fostering all sorts of useful information and valuable connections in an industry that you've been passionate about and lived in for what? Your entire
23 years.
Right. So you're happy now?
Oh yeah, I'm having a great time. I'm fortunate enough to have figured out a way to do something completely new and still do exactly the same thing. I was tired of what I was doing. I saw that the business was changing. And I, purely by accident, invented a way of staying in the business that I love, and in fact am now more connected. Again, just as I talked about authors liking that connection. I used to do business with, let's say, a subset of 50 people. And now I have some form of relationship with thousands of people. And whether I've just met them and talked to them through email, or whether I've met them at conferences like this, or whether I've come to know them over lunches, I've become re-engaged in my own business and learned more about my own business in a way that I never imagined possible. And I've become useful to people in my own business, which is the real satisfaction, in a way that I never imagined possible. There are people making deals and getting jobs and finding information and creating opportunities and selling rights because of some of the things that I've been able to create personally and have bolstered because people responded to them, which is immensely satisfying.
It's much more so than the making of the money, isn't it? It's almost like the fact that you're helping others to connect and enrich in their lives, working and otherwise, is just I can tell looking at you.
Oh, it's invaluable. This was not created as a business. This was
passion
created as a passion, and I had to figure out a business to go along with it because it was what my wife called the world's worst hobby. It was consuming. I was addicted. The people reading it were addicted, and I was wondering, well, is this the ruin of me? Because I had a very successful business making books for people, or was there a way to layer a business on top of it? And it's been invention by necessity, but also for fun, because it's yet another way of experimenting with how does online information work? Is there any money in it?
What you've done is you've sort of taken a newsletter model,
right,
and taken advantage of all of the additional technological stuff that people can do to connect through it.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it turns out I'm really in the attention business. I have the attention of a business community. Yeah. And that attention, the advertisers pay for attention. Everybody pays for attention. People pay Amazon, you pay your bookstore for attention. Attention's a great commodity. It's collecting it that's hard, and also figuring out how to harness it in a useful way. You know, in the early days of the internet, people traded ads and links, and they devalued their attention. I never did any of that. I never went for what business people call low-hanging fruit. I never sold my audience out for cheap, because to me this began as a relationship. I valued the relationship, and over time I found a way to turn that relationship into a business, such that, and this is what thrills me more than the money I make for the revenue opportunities we presented, is the reaction. It's all cheap and it works. My advertisers thank me for bringing them so much traffic and giving them the ability to have paid to put something in my newsletter. My job board clients thank me for bringing them so many qualified applicants in 3 days that they filled their job right away. It's efficient so that the cost to them is negligible. It's less. It's a fraction of what they used to have to pay to get something accomplished, and it works so much better. And that, too, is immensely satisfying because, again, it's providing a great service for people in lots of different ways and helping them do what they want to do even when there's money attached, which is, you know, how can it be better than that?
Pretty good note for us to end on. Thank you very much for your time. I've been speaking with Michael Cader, who is the founder, creator of
Chief Do-It Guy,
who is fulfilled and is helping others with publishers.
Marketplace.com.
Thanks again.
Thank you.